Typically, when I'm getting into an army for Warhammer 40,000, it starts with a period of experimentation. Putting together a few models, trying some kit bashes, trying some conversions, doing some test models, a couple of different paint schemes, getting the army like 25% of the way there, and then deciding on something better, scrapping it all, starting over. And that eventually leads to me painting them exactly how I want them to be painted. My Death Guard are a little unique. On a whim, I bought and painted one singular Death Guard, and I really liked it. I tried something funky with the painting, doing some kind of psychedelic blues and greens and yellows, and I really like how it's turned out. And I've since put together an entire Death Guard army, painting every single one the exact same way. And so I didn't go through that period of experimentation and trial and error, but I kinda still want to. There's something to the classic, or at least the more classic Death Guard color palette. I wanna see what it looks like. The Death Guard box is awesome. It only comes with 7 Space Marines because 7 is Nurgle's number and Games Workshop wanted to be cute, but it's chock full of weapon options. I found a fun little torso and a pair of legs in a backpack, and I started putting together my little Plague Boy. Now, one thing I want to try is some kit bashing. You might think there isn't much that would fit alongside a Plague Marine, but the Mark II Space Marine bits are exactly right. I put a Mark II backpack on instead of the overgrown version from the kit, and this got me thinking. I went and found the bolter arm. This guy is meant to be carrying a disgusting looking plague bolter, but really it's just a Godwin pattern bolter with some extra stuff. I swapped it for an unplagified version and glued it down. For his melee weapon, I put on a plague knife. All Plague Marines get to have this weapon. It's essentially Space Marine fists, but with 1 extra punch and lethal hits. It gives the squad a little bit of extra close combat power. Now that he's armed and armored, there's plenty of shoulders and helmets in the kit, but I think it would be a good opportunity to clean him up. I found a Mark II head and some old Forge Rolled resin Mark II shoulder pads that I had kicking around. I put some balls of green stuff in his neck to give him a little bit of extra height. I like my Chaos Marines to feel a little bigger than they really are, so that they look like a good threat to Primaris Space Marines. Then I put some more little blobs of green stuff in his shoulders and then squished these down. For Space Marines, I don't know if it's possible to go too big with the shoulder pads, and these Mark IIs are particularly tall. Look at this cute little fella. He looks like he's having a tummy ache. This guy is looking pretty spicy. Giving him the normal Mark III shoulder pad, backpack, gun, and helmet makes him look a little bit more clean, and I feel like it makes him look a little bit tougher. With Death Guard, I feel like there's 2 different routes to go down. Games Workshop has gone pretty far down the path of mutation, giving every single guy tons and tons of like tree branches and tentacles and maggots and flies poking out of everywhere. And that's a lot of fun for sculpture and if you're doing something zany with the paint job. But I think another way that is equally striking is to really focus on the corrosion. Make your guys classic, strong, tanky Space Marines, but actually use a lot of rust and a lot of dripping oil and a lot of verdigris to really show like the age and the strength of the Death Guard. And that's kind of what I want to try on this guy. But first, he's gonna need a base. Plague Marines stand on the tried and true 32mm base, and to give him a little extra height, I want to bulk him up a little. I coated the ground with super glue and then squished on some 1/4-inch cork. I tore this off around the base, leaving me with a jagged natural edge, and I sanded it on an angle like he's proudly marching uphill. Now to make it look like he's wandering through a battlefield being taken over by Nurgle's gift. I poured out some perforated metal Grim Battlefield basing bits available at EonsOfBattle.com. EonsOfBattle.com is the place to find our merch like the Nick and Jay dice and basing bits and toppers printed for you. And it's the best way to support us doing what we do with a membership. Each month, members will get a credit that they can use on our new monthly terrain packs or any previous pack we have ever made. This May, we're delving back into the Hungry Maw with the Infested Colony, a world recently ravaged by the chitinous teeth and claws of the Endless Swarm, a series of ruined buildings crumbling under the weight of hypercharged plant growth and impaled by alien limbs, and shipping containers that have been ripped to shreds or torn open from the inside out. These relics of an alien war are designed with competitive wargaming in mind and an eye for storytelling, matching perfectly with our previous alien hive colony. With this set, you can build a wargaming table dripping with alien atmosphere. I traced out this big chunk and then I carved a spot for it, sinking it into the cork and then superglued it down and started adding more chunks on top. I made sure that there was room for my boy to stand, and to make sure that his feet have plenty of contact with the base, I took some more green stuff and put small balls under his feet and then squished these down. Now my little Marine is ready to spread the contagion. In modern Warhammer 40,000, the Death Guard are green. And why are they green? There's not really a good reason. I think the actual reason is because green is the color of Icky, and the Death Guard are the Icky Chaos Marines. But I guess Nurgle is green, and so to better represent Nurgle, their Chaos God, they went with green armor. but they didn't used to be green. Before the discovery of Mortarion, the 14th Legion was known as the Dusk Raiders, and they had a badass color scheme. It was gray all over with a crimson red right shoulder pad and arm, which is a really, really cool look. But after joining Mortarion and becoming the Death Guard, they went with white armor with like a military green accent color, kind of like this shirt. And that is a pretty good look, and light colors show off rust and corrosion really, really well. So I think that actually might be a little bit of a stronger color scheme than just modern icky green. I started off giving the whole mini a black prime. I want him basically white in the end, but I want him to be dark in the recesses, so this will be a good base to work up from. Now, to set myself up later, I sprayed the base with some brown and I let it splash onto his feet. Next, I gave the whole mini a base coat of a sickly green. This color doesn't cover perfectly over the black, so I sprayed it in a few thin layers, making it brightest from above and a little darker from below. Now, to finish off the base coats, I sprayed some white paint from above, just getting this onto his helmet, shoulders, backpack, and his pot belly. Now he's looking good, it's time to lay in some base coats. This guy has just a little bit of color, and the first thing is some military green on his shoulders, and I put this on his knees too. I gave these spots a quick dry brushing of a saturated green to make them a little bit more vibrant. Then I moved on to the trim, and unlike most Chaos Space Marines, Death Guard thankfully don't have a lot of trim. I started out base coating these spots with some dark brass, which stands out proudly against the light colored armor, and then I dusted these spots with some gold paint to brighten them up a little and bring out the details. I threw these colors onto his bolter as well, and now for his plague bits. I hit these with a very watery coat of pink paint. He also has some boils, and I hit those with some yellow paint. I don't have to be too careful or fussy about these base coats. It'll all get fixed in the last step. I gave the whole model a coat of gloss varnish, and while that was drying, I decided to tackle the base. I threw down one big wet coat of dark red paint, and while that was wet, I took some black paint and quickly blended it in, using my brush to push around the paint and mix it into the old. I did the same thing with an orange, focusing on the raised areas, rubbing this into the paint, and then I finished it off with a dry brushing of orange. These rusty saturated colors will stand out in stark contrast of his green desaturated body. And speaking of that body, it could use some decals. I found the number 14, perfect for the 14th Legion, and put this on his shoulder and on one of his knees. Normally there isn't much room on a Plague Marine for decals, but since I used the Horus Heresy bits, I have plenty of room to throw these low effort, high impact decorations on. On one of his shoulders, I didn't put on the symbol of the 14th Legion, but instead found 3 little skulls. This little trio makes the symbol of Nurgle. I used a sponge to put some green over the numbers to make them look chipped and weathered, and now my little guy is looking surprisingly clean. Now I've painted this guy up pretty much following the Horus Heresy color scheme, which I think is a very strong color scheme, but there is a bit of precedent for this color scheme existing in the 41st millennia. In the Death Guard Codex, one of the sub-factions of the Death Guard are the Pallid Hand, which are a pallid bone color, and there are also the Rotworm Brotherhood, which actually have fairly crispy clean armor. And this guy very much has crispy clean armor, and I think that this guy would be the perfect time to try out some enamels. Also in here, there's a picture of an Astartes vessel that has the complexion of a Chicken McNugget as a plague ship. It's pretty cool. It would be really cool to have a Land Raider in this style. I have a love-hate relationship with enamels. I feel like only 50% of the time I get the look I'm after, but I think it's important to use them right. I have this greenish streak and grime, orange rust, and dark umber. These colors should show up beautifully over the nearly white armor. I started out with a streak and grime, brushing this all over him. It feels really wrong putting this on because it covers so much, but then I started taking it off and it looked pretty good. I used a makeup wedge and an eyeshadow applicator with a little bit of mineral spirits on them, and this blasted through the grime and left it behind in the recesses. This color stained the white a little bit, but it did a really good job of making him look grimy, dare I say, a little streaky. In a few spots, it was hard to get in there with the makeup wedge, so I used a clean brush with mineral spirits on it and dabbed those spots clean, and now my guy is ready for some color. I put a rust color over his weapons and armor, letting it pool in the recesses, and it does help break up the dirt. It gives a little life to his tentacles. I used the panel liner in a few spots to darken the recesses further and did some final cleaning and tidying with my makeup sponge, and he's done. This really was the perfect use of streak and grime. It didn't take too much time and gave me exactly the look I was after. I put some blood splatter over his plague knife, getting it nice and bloody, and I picked out his eyes with a yellow glow, painting a strip in the inside of each socket. Then the only thing left was hitting the base rim with some black paint, and this guy is ready for action, and he painted up pretty quick. I think the Death Guard clean up really nicely. The Horus Heresy armor on top of the Plague Marine kit does have a really fun look. For my Death Guard, I like having every tentacle and every tree branch on my guys, but if I was going the more big, tough armor dudes that are slowly rusting away, I think dipping into 30k is a really fun way to go. The Mark 6 Death Guard helmets and shoulder pads do look good on Mark 3 armor, and the helmets aren't super beaky. And speaking of the Mark 3 kit, you get 20 Space Marine bodies. You throw a couple of Plague Marine sprues on top of that, you got a nice Death Guard Horde army, and Death Guard Horde is pretty good. They are kind of the zombie Chaos Space Marines. I have an old school Plague Marine, and comparing it to the new guy, I would say they're pretty much indistinguishable. And looking at this guy next to the same guy that I painted up in my scheme, it's crazy to think that this is the exact same guy. This is 2 Plague Marines done 2 different ways, scrambled and over easy. It's the exact same sculpt, but they look incredibly different. I would say the one I painted today is much more kind of realistic, but I do like the crazy collage of the color scheme that I've invented. In the tabletop, Death Guard are their own faction with their own codex and units, but they don't necessarily have to be. All Death Guard are Plague Marines, but not all Plague Marines are Death Guard. Plenty of Chaos Space Marines fall to the god Nurgle, and they can be allied into any Chaos Space Marine army. And there's nothing stopping you from taking the Plague Marine sprue and just turning it into things like Havocs or Warp Talons or Possessed or Chosen, and they would look really good. There's a lot of great bits in the Death Guard kit. I like the Death Guard a lot. I mean, I have a Death Guard army, but it was fun to pretend like I didn't, and to try the same thing, but a little bit different. Let me know in the comments below, what Chaos Space Marine, Warband, or Legion should I take a look at next?